April 10, 1945. The skies above southern Germany shimmered like a sheet of steel. High in the cold air, the contrails of dying empires crossed in silence. Below, towns lay in ruin, their factories hollow, their roads littered with burnt armor. But high above, something still moved too fast for the eye to follow. Two Messerschmitt Me .62s cut through the horizon, silver gray and ghost-like, streaking toward a formation of American bombers that droned steadily toward Regensburg. The sound of their jet engines, sharp, metallic, almost alien, broke through the air like a new language of war. For years, the Germans had dreamed of machines like this, aircraft that could outfly and outfight anything the Allies possessed. The Me 262 was their miracle, sleek, twin-engined, armed with 30mm cannons, and capable of speeds that made propeller aircraft seem like relics of another age. To the Luftwaffe, it was proof that German engineering could still change the course of a war slipping out of their control. But what those pilots did not see, rising in the distant haze, were the dark specks of American fighters climbing to meet them. They were P-51 Mustangs, long-range escorts that had become the unrelenting shadow of the U.S. bomber fleet. With their Merlin engines howling, they closed the gap in moments. The Me 262s tried to pull away, but the Mustangs were already firing, banking, rolling relentless. Within seconds, smoke trailed from one jet. As it spiraled down through the sky, the other escaped into the clouds, its advantage undone not by technology, but by timing, numbers, and endurance. The story of how Germany's revolutionary jets fell before America's piston-powered Mustangs is one of technological brilliance, strategic failure, and industrial dominance. By 1943, the air war over Europe had become a test of national will. The Allies were bombing German cities and industrial centers daily. The 8th Air Force alone was sending hundreds of B-17s and B-24s deep into the Reich, often losing dozens in a single mission. The Luftwaffe fought back with skill and ferocity, but the losses were mounting. At first, American bombers flew without escorts capable of reaching Germany's heartland. The early fighters P-38 Lightnings and P-47 Thunderbolts had limited range. Once the bombers crossed into central Germany, they were on their own, and the Luftwaffe knew it. Squadrons of Bf-109s and Fw-190s would rise to meet them, shredding the bomber formations with cannon fire. In 1943, Allied losses were catastrophic. Nearly 1 in 5 bombers failed to return from some missions. The answer came in the form of a slender, elegant aircraft first designed by North American aviation, not for the U.S. Army, but for Britain. The P-51 Mustang began as a simple request from the Royal Air Force in 1940 for a modern fighter. Its early versions were fast and agile, but their Allison engine struggled at high altitude. The transformation came when British engineers fitted it with the Rolls-Royce Merlin engine licensed for production in the U.S. as the Packard Merlin. The result was extraordinary. With that engine, the Mustang could fly higher, faster, and farther than any Allied fighter before it. Fitted with drop tanks, it could escort bombers all the way from English bases to Berlin and back. It was armed with 6.50 caliber Browning machine guns and could sustain high speed at great altitude. In the air, it was not just fast, it was forgiving, stable, and lethal in the hands of well-trained American pilots. By late 1943, the Mustangs began entering service with the 8th Air Force. Their arrival coincided with the most intense period of the Allied bombing campaign. Big Week, in February 1944, was the true test. Thousands of bombers attacked aircraft factories across Germany while hundreds of Mustangs swept ahead to clear the skies. The results were decisive. The Luftwaffe, already struggling with fuel shortages and the loss of veteran pilots, was torn apart. In a single week, German aircraft production facilities were crippled, and the air defenses suffered losses they could not replace. Still, the Germans pinned their hopes on a new kind of weapon. Jet propulsion promised a leap so vast that it could offset even the Allies' industrial might. The Me 262, developed from a 1938 concept, became operational in 1944. Its speed over 540 miles per hour made it untouchable to most Allied fighters in level flight. It could dive upon bomber formations, fire its devastating cannons, and vanish before the escorts could respond. But like much of late-war German technology, it was a masterpiece built in a crumbling workshop. The jet's engines, the Junkers Jumo 004, were fragile and short-lived. Each lasted only about 25 flight hours before failure. They required scarce metals like chromium and nickel, already exhausted by years of blockade. The takeoff and landing speeds were dangerously high, forcing pilots to use long, exposed runways easily, targeted by Allied fighters. And most critically, the jet came too late. By the time the Me-262 entered combat in mid-1944, the Allies dominated the air. P-51 squadrons roamed freely across occupied Europe, striking airfields, trains, and convoys. The Luftwaffe could barely refuel, let alone train new pilots. Many of its most experienced aces had been lost over Russia or defending against the relentless bombing of Germany's cities. Even so, when the jets appeared, Allied pilots were shocked by their speed. Dogfighting with a Me-262 was almost impossible in the traditional sense. The jets could accelerate away at will, but the Americans quickly adapted. They learned to strike the jets during takeoff and landing moments when the Me-262 was slow and vulnerable. P-51 pilots began patrolling near German air bases, waiting for the telltale whine of turbines. As the jets came into land, the Mustangs pounced. One of the most famous such encounters came in October 1944, when Lieutenant Urban Bendrew of the 375th Fighter Squadron spotted two Me-262s near Ahmer Airfield, diving from altitude. Drew closed in before the jets could accelerate. In a few bursts, both German aircraft were down. For that feat, he was awarded the Distinguished Flying Cross. Encounters like his revealed the truth. The jet was not invincible. It was deadly, but fragile. The Me-262's greatest enemy was not the P-51, it was time. Hitler's interference delayed its deployment for nearly a year. He insisted it be adapted as a bomber to strike Allied ground forces rather than as a pure interceptor. That decision crippled its effectiveness when it finally reached operational squadrons. Fewer than 300 saw combat in meaningful numbers. Meanwhile, by early 1945, the U.S. had produced more than 15,000 P-51 Mustangs. Numbers alone made the outcome inevitable. From the cockpit of a Mustang, the war looked different. Pilots described the view of endless bomber formations stretching to the horizon, each aircraft representing American factories, workers, and engineers thousands of miles away. The Mustang was more than a machine, it was the airborne embodiment of an industrial system that could outproduce and outlast anything Germany could field. For every jet that rolled off a German line, dozens of Mustangs took to the sky. The air war over Europe in those final months was brutal. P-51s hunted the Luftwaffe mercilessly. They strafed airfields, trains, and convoys that chased enemy aircraft across the Reich. The Luftwaffe, once feared across continents, became a shadow force. Many of its remaining pilots were teenagers with only minimal flight training. Against seasoned American aviators flying the best fighter of the war, they stood little chance. In April 1945, as Allied troops crossed the Rhine, the last operational Me-262 units were grounded by lack of fuel. Their sleek frames sat abandoned on runways littered with debris. The jet, once hailed as Germany's wonder weapon, had become a symbol of lost potential, a glimpse of the future that arrived too late to matter. Meanwhile, P-51 still patrolled above, ensuring that no German aircraft could interfere with the armies advancing on Berlin. When Germany surrendered in May 1945, the Allies captured dozens of Me-262s intact. Engineers and pilots from the United States, Britain, and the Soviet Union examined them closely. They recognized the genius of its design, but also its flaws. The lessons learned would shape aviation for decades, influencing jet development worldwide. The P-51 Mustang's true triumph lay in its integration into the Allied war system. It extended the reach of bombers, reduced losses, and allowed the relentless strategic bombing that destroyed Germany's war industry. Between early 1944 and spring 1945, Allied bomber losses fell by nearly half, while the number of targets destroyed multiplied. By the time the Me-262 entered widespread service, the factories it needed for maintenance and production were already rubble. Pilots who flew both types after the war often described their feelings with respect, rather than rivalry. German veterans admitted that the P-51 was the finest piston-engine fighter ever built. American pilots, in turn, acknowledged the Me-262 as a glimpse of the jet age to come, but in the context of the war that existed, not the one that could have been. The outcome was determined long before technology entered the air. The Mustang was the right aircraft, in the right numbers, at the right time. As the sun set on Europe's airfields in May 1945, Wrecked Me-62s lay beside captured FW-190s and BF-109s. The smell of burned aviation fuel still lingered in the air. American ground crews posed for photographs with the captured jets, marveling at their design. Yet above them, the drone of P-51 engines continued, a reminder that victory belonged not to innovation alone, but to endurance, coordination, and timing. The story of the Me-262 and the Mustang is more than a comparison of machines. It's a study of wartime momentum. Germany had brilliance in isolation, scientists, engineers, visionaries, but it lacked the resources and time to turn invention into dominance. The United States fused invention with mass production, strategy, and logistics. Every Mustang in the sky was backed by an ocean of supply ships, a continent of factories, and an army of workers. For the German pilots who survived, the memory of those final battles never faded. Many later recalled the frustration of watching jets grounded for want of fuel or parts, while American aircraft filled the horizon. For the Americans, those same skies represented proof that planning and perseverance could overcome even the most advanced technology. By the end of the war, more than 5,000 Mustang pilots had achieved aerial victories, and the aircraft's loss rate remained remarkably low given the intensity of its missions. It escorted bombers, strafed ground targets, and still returned home. When peace finally came, it continued to serve in Korea and in air forces around the world. The Me-262, meanwhile, became a museum piece, a beautiful, tragic monument to what might have been. Looking back, the rivalry between the jet and the Mustang was never truly equal. One represented the desperate last throw of a nation collapsing under its own weight, the other, the product of a system reaching its peak efficiency. The Me-262 may have been faster, but speed alone could not save an air force starved of pilots, fuel, and time. The P-51 may have been slower, but it was steady, disciplined, and everywhere. In the fading light of the war's final months, the two machines met over the ruins of Europe, one racing toward the future, the other securing the present. The outcome of that clash defined not just who ruled the skies in 1945, but how the modern world would understand the balance between brilliance and power, invention and endurance. The Me-262 proved that technology can leap ahead of its age. The P-51 Mustang proved that victory depends on mastering the world that already exists. And as the last contrails faded above the defeated Reich, the sound that remained in the air was not the sharp whine of the jet, but the steady, confident growl of the Mustang engine, America's heartbeat in the sky.